Here, as ever, the campers are out. That's part of the old circuit which overlooks the new one. And they're out in numbers with the campfires, and my goodness, they need them, because although there's no rain, and although there is the Schloss Nürburg in the background, and this is the old Nürburgring. And that is a Mercedes-Benz with Dick Seaman, and there is Tazio Nuvolari driving the Auto Union. These majestic cars, Mercedes, Auto Union, Alfa Romeo, Maserati and Bugatti, which fought for supremacy at the Nürburgring before the war, driven by men like Caracciola, Seaman, Lang, Rosemeyer, Stuck, and then in the latter years after the war, Jackie Stewart, and there he is, 3 times a winner at the Nürburgring. And he has said anybody who loves the ring, or says he does, is a liar, because it's that tough. It's a frightening circuit. The Schwalbenschwanz was one of the famous parts. There is Niki Lauda at the Döttinger Höhe, not so far from where I am sitting, in his Ferrari, world champion in 1975 and 77. And there were many famous spots around this incredible circuit, which I did 2 laps of the other day, and is now too narrow for racing these days and poses all sorts of safety problems. So that is the site of the new Nürburgring, 2.82 miles long. There it is. It took 2.5 years to build at a cost of over £20 million. They had to shift, to throw some more statistics at you, 2.5 million cubic meters of soil. They had to cut down, and this will offend a lot of people, I'm sure, 80 hectares of woods, but I assure you that there is a great deal left. They laid 90,000 tons of asphalt, and they have built 15 stands for 100,000 spectators, and in the process, they have obliterated the old South Circuit. Now, the drivers originally were not altogether enchanted with the new Nürburgring. They said they found it bland, they said they found it not demanding, but a lot of them are changing their song now that they've been out for 2 days of practice. Ayrton Senna, for one, likes it very much, so do many of the others. Derek Warwick is quite ecstatic about it, regards it as a very difficult and demanding circuit. And I can tell you that the long European Grand Prix, which is what we're about to watch, because the German Grand Prix has already taken place at Hockenheim, of course, won by Alain Prost. And Alain Prost, as we look down on the new circuit, I can tell you, went off and crashed in the warm-up period this morning. He was coming out of the top right corner there on your screen, which leads into the finishing straight, the Roma curve. And what you're seeing now is a computer-designed ideal line at the Nürburgring, which, according to the technicians, reduces the length of the circuit by enough to make quite a time difference. Well, I can tell you that Nelson Piquet has already beaten the planned computer fastest lap, and that's a nice thing to know. A human being has beaten the machine. Piquet went round for pole position for the 8th time this year, the 16th time in his career, to set a first ever pole position time for a Grand Prix at the new Nürburgring, 1 minute 18.87, an incredible speed of 128.8 miles an hour. There's the man that everybody will be looking at, Niki Lauda, and he's got to fight his way up from 15th place on the grid in the McLaren. Number 24 there is the car of Piercarlo Ghinzani, the Italian driver, who went extremely well in the very, very wet practice session yesterday, and at one time was 3rd fastest. And the grid is formed up in the traditional pattern. Those are the World Championship points, and as you can see, according to that table, Niki Lauda is 10.5 points ahead of Alain Prost, but in fact, he might only be 9.5 points in front of Alain Prost, because there is a move afoot to remove all history of Tyrrell having taken part in the World Championship this year by moving all competitors who finished behind Tyrrell cars in Grand Prix up a place, as a result of which, if it happens, and I emphasize that this is by no means certain, Alain Prost would gain a point. and the gap would only be 9.5 points. We won't know that until the answer to that from FISA, the governing body of motorsport, until the beginning of next week. But it could make quite a difference. However, we should know by, in fact we will know by the end of this race, whether the World Championship is going down to the wire at the Portuguese Grand Prix at Estoril on October the 21st. There you've seen the grid forming up as I was speaking to you, and I confirm that Nelson Piquet is in the lead, Alain Prost in second position, Patrick Tambay repeating the excellent form that he showed at the last Grand Prix at Italy in third position, and he was second fastest in the warm-up. Keke Rosberg fourth on the grid, and there you saw Niki Lauda 15th position on the grid. The two Ferraris went much better in practice here than they have done recently. Alboreto fifth on the grid and Arnoux sixth, followed by Derek Warwick, not altogether happy with his seventh place. Nigel Mansell in eighth position, and there is Niki Lauda again. Well, James, you've driven and won on the old Nürburgring. What's your view of the new one?
Well, I think it's really totally different, Murray. It's an ultra-modern circuit designed with the best possible facilities. They've done a marvellous job, but sadly for me, and I think for most people, they haven't really captured the character of the old circuit, which I think, with a bit of imagination, for the same amount of money, they could probably have done. There are none of the beautiful tree-lined twisty sections that we had. Of course, they couldn't ever begin to emulate the great long Nürburgring, and of course it was its length that finally caused its demise, or certainly for Grand Prix racing. But anyway, we shall see. This is certainly a fine circuit, and I think the Germans, they put tremendous amounts of money and effort into it, and I think it will develop its own character over the years, but at the moment it's too new to have any, and of course we come here and nostalgically think of the great character of the old one.
Yes, I think the new Nürburgring is going to take on a charisma of its own. It is, as James has said, a quite magnificent circuit in its way, and it's just a few seconds now to the start as you look at the last man on the grid, Stefan Johansson in his Toleman, which has the latest electronically fired Hart engine. There is Thierry Boutsen, the Belgian, in the Arrows with the BMW engine on the new type Goodyear tyres, which have dramatically improved the performance of the cars to which they are fitted. Nelson Piquet leads away on the final warm-up lap from Alain Prost. There behind him, Patrick Tambay, then Keke Rosberg, the two Ferraris, Derek Warwick we are looking at now, seventh on the grid, followed by Nigel Mansell, sprinting through, eighth on the grid. Behind them, Riccardo Patrese in his Alfa Romeo. They are now round the first left and right, which is turns 1 and 2. They're on their way down now the short straight into turn 3, the left-hander. From there into turn 4, the Ford curve, and then up to a very quick stretch before the hairpin, which is a second hairpin, and you can see the Eiffels in the background. You can see one of the 3 magnificent electronic scoreboards for the competitive spectators' benefit. And from there they go up to Shell Curve, which is a 5th gear left-hander, climbing uphill because they've dropped down to the hairpin. Into this left-hander here, turn 7, another very little short straight into Bit Curve, a 4th gear right-hander, and then they start to drop downhill into the Hatzenbogen, and as ever the cars are weaving and jinking and putting pressure on their tyres. Well, is Niki Lauda going to be able to come through the field from 15th into the lead?
Well, certainly he'll be able to improve, but whilst obviously he wants to get a move on, incidentally he had a very down on power engine in practice on Friday when they qualified, because of course it was wet yesterday, had no chance to improve on that, but they did get the car right. He was fastest of all in the warm-up this morning, and that of course is the cars running in race trim with full tanks, just as they are now, so that's very significant. But overtaking is quite difficult here, and the one thing that Niki absolutely must not do, and I'm sure will be very much in the forefront of his mind. He must not take any risks in overtaking, so he may not be able to get through the fields as quickly as he would like, but it's essential that he finishes, and he finishes in the points. If he drives a sensible race, has no mechanical trouble, he's bound to be well up there. And of course he'll want to know what Prost is up to, because Prost is up near the front of the grid. He's second. And Alain Prost, we hear, is in his race car. He had an accident, a minor accident this morning, and some engine trouble, and they changed all that, changed the engine and repaired it, and have not using the T-car.
Directly opposite me as I sit here, Nelson Piquet, then Alain Prost. In the yellow car is Patrick Tambay, third on the grid. Then Keke Rosberg, followed by the two Ferraris. They're going from here, when the lights go, from red to green, down to the first right-hander, turn one, which is immediately followed by the left. Prost, who leads into the right at the end of this short straight, with Patrick Tambay going up and taking second position away from Nelson Piquet. So the Frenchman in the Renault is already meaning to be up front, as he was in Italy, and two cars gone off. One of them is the Arrows, but I didn't see the other two clearly enough. It was the ATS of Gerhard Berger. I can't identify the third one, but we soon will. And Alain Prost is leading on lap one in the European Grand Prix as they drop down to the hairpin.
As while we look at that, I noticed that Niki Lauda must have made a pretty good start. He was in just guesstimating at a grid, something like 10th place. So it looks as if he's moved up on his grid position. So he'd be well happy with that if he can.
Well, it's Ghinzani there who's in trouble. The third man was Piercarlo Ghinzani, so his European Grand Prix didn't last very long in the Osella. Alain Prost with 5 victories under his belt, who has to finish in front of Niki Lauda to keep his World Championship hopes alive, and there was Lauda, leading then from Patrick Tambay. They're coming now through the chicane, the very fast fourth gear, 155-mile-an-hour section. Niki Lauda is already up into 9th position, and it's Prost, it's Tambay, Piquet third, Warwick. Derek Warwick is fourth, ahead of the two Ferraris of Michele Alboreto and René Arnoux, and you're looking on lap 2 out of 67, with already the course car out to pull somebody away. And Alain Prost going now through the sweeps on the way down through Ford Curve, fourth gear up to 170 miles an hour, dropping down then to the right-handed hairpin at the lowest point of the circuit. And the Frenchman with those 5 victories behind him, and it's Fabi. Theo Fabi in the Brabham is out of the Grand Prix. So already at least 3 competitors out. Fabi, Ghinzani, Berger, unless he has been able to rejoin, but Fabi gets going again and is in the race. It's a question of whether he would be penalised if he had anything other than a start on momentum, as it were. Elio De Angelis is carving his way through the field. He started 23rd. He is up into 11th position. Lap 2, Prost, Tambay, Piquet, Warwick gaining on the Brabham, Alboreto, Arnoux completing lap 2. Alain Prost goes through, and the gap between the Frenchman and Tambay is just about 3/4 of a second, that's all, and you can see that Piquet is in the wheel tracks and Niki Lauda is up into 8th position.
Yes, and just moving past one of the Alphas there into 7th place. So Lauda is fairly carving through the field. He will be very happy indeed with his progress at this stage, to be up into 7th place after a couple of laps. That's assuming that he completed the overtaking manoeuvre. So there is Alain Prost. His race also is going extremely well for him. He's got a comfortable little lead, and he's not under pressure from behind, so he can now take it very steadily. And that won't be a good sight for Niki, because he obviously would like to see Prost under some pressure. And it looks, beginning to look as if the only person who's likely to do that is Nicky, if he can get through the field in time before Prost gets away. Prost, of course, there is Lauda in 7th place behind the 2 Ferraris. And Prost will probably be trying pretty hard at the moment because he'd like as much air between himself and Lauda as possible when Lauda gets, if and when he gets through the leading 6.
3 seconds now between Prost, the leader, Tournbay second. There's Warwick fourth. 5th is Alboreto. And now, as they go into their 4th lap, it's Alain Prost leading. There he is. Patrick Tournbay in 2nd position. And you can see how closely the competitors behind Prost are, with Piquet 3rd, Warwick 4th, Alboreto in 5th position. Niki Lauda coming up through the field, fast indeed, from 15th to 7th and gaining. Let's see where he is now. There's Alboreto. There is René Arnoux in 6th position, and there was Niki Lauda 7th.
Yes, Lauda's catching the Ferraris pretty quickly. There he goes, following Arnoux. Got away from those Alphas fast, but I think from now on, each car will be progressively more difficult for him to pass. He's getting amongst the competitive cars with the more powerful engines. And Elio De Angelis is also charging through the field, and he's catching Eddie Cheever. Nigel Mansell is, I'm afraid, down in 19th place still.
Well, there was Elio De Angelis passing Joe Gartner, I think it was, in the Osella. And last is Mauro Baldi, who is taking the place of Hub Rotengatter in the Spirit Heart. And this is Niki Lauda catching René Arnoux, who is in 6th position. So we look at now Tournbay 2nd, Piquet 3rd, Warwick 4th. There goes Alboreto 5th, Arnoux 6th, and Lauda's closing right up on him to take him with the 2 Alfa Romeos of Patrese and Cheever in 7th and 8th positions, and they go through now, completing their 4th lap, and we're going to see Niki Lauda, I think, come out from underneath the rear wing of René Arnoux as Patrese and Cheever, and look at Elio De Angelis, who is now up into 9th position. So Elio De Angelis has made even better progress in terms of place gains than Niki Lauda, because Elio De Angelis is up into 9th position. There he is in the black and gold JPS, followed by Thierry Boutsen there in 10th position. And as you see, Prost is fastest so far.
Yes, and Nicky's problems are now he's getting into the teeth, his teeth into the problem, because for the first time he's stuck behind the car. He caught René Arnoux very quickly, but the cars are just that little bit too evenly matched for Nicky to have a go. So now he's going to have to put his thinking cap on and try and work out a way round. Until he reached Arnoux, he's been able to just drive past the others on the straight. But as we thought a few minutes ago, he's in amongst the more competitive cars, so things are going to get a little bit tougher for him, and he's really going to have to work at this passing, because of course, remember, he can't take any risks. He must finish.
As we look at Alain Prost now on his 6th lap, this must be very reassuring for him, because his car from behind his shoulders has been completely rebuilt since the half-hour warm-up period this morning. New engine and new rear suspension.
Well, and as they went past us on the start-finish line, Lauda has actually passed René Arnoux. So Niki Lauda has moved up into 6th place. He's ahead of René Arnoux, and now he's got Alboreto to deal with. There is Alain Prost, stretching away the lead, very comfortable for him. And as I say, of some annoyance probably to Nicky, who would have liked to have seen Prost under pressure, because this is a very difficult race for him if he gets under pressure, because he must win it, but of course he can't afford to make a mistake, and that all adds up to being pressure.
Lap 6, there are the new positions. Prost leading, Tournbay 2nd in the Renault, Piquet in the Brabham, Warwick in the 2nd Renault in 4th position, Alboreto in the Ferrari ahead of Niki Lauda in the McLaren. So both the McLarens, and here is the first of them, driven by Alain Prost up to the chicane and through it at an incredible 155 miles an hour, are in the top 6. The points, having already very convincingly won the Constructors' Championship this year. Tournbay, Piquet, who was slow in the warm-up, doesn't seem to be quick enough in the race. There is Warwick 4th, Alboreto 5th, and you can see the Lauda in the points now ahead of Arnoux is catching Derek Warwick. and Alboreto. He's already disposed of the Ferrari of René Arnoux, so I imagine he's going to be able to do the same thing with Michele Alboreto. And by the way, the Italian Alboreto and the Frenchman Arnoux are both in the new M2 Ferrari 126 V6 turbocharged cars, which, like every other car in the race, is now having to copy the basic principles of the McLaren design of John Barnard. The race leader on lap 7, Alain Prost. Weather just about perfect, a bit on the cold side. JPS Lotus had an innovation today because they actually have electrically heated blankets to keep the tyres warm and wrap them round the rubber to prevent it losing temperature. And so now there they go through, and Niki Lauda right up with Alboreto in 5th position, who is just behind Warwick in 4th place. And we are on lap 7. Keke Rosberg is missing. Keke Rosberg appears to be out of the European Grand Prix, having joined Teo Fabi, who's back in the race, and Ghinzani, who went out earlier on. And now here they come through absolutely together, and it's Warwick and Alboreto, 4th and 5th, and behind them, there he goes, Niki Lauda into turn 1. René Arnoux there in 7th position. Then the two Alfa Romeos still of Patrese 8th, Chiva 9th. Elio De Angelis is 10th, Boutsen is 11th, Andre De Cesaris is 12th, Stefan Johansson is up from 26th to 23rd, to 13th, and Francois Hainaut is 14th ahead of Nigel Mansell in 15th position, and Jonathan Palmer is 17th. Lap 8, Lauda, 6th position. Ahead of him, the target, Michele Alboreto, Scarlet Ferrari. Ahead of him, the yellow Renault, 4th place, Derek Warwick. Braking for turn 8. Into the right-hander, turn 7. Into the right-hander at turn 8. As the two Alphas go through, followed by De Angelis, then Boutsen. Up to the chicane. Warwick, 4th. With Piquet just disappearing. Alboreto dropping back a little bit in 5th position. Got Lauda big in his mirrors. Lauda in the points. The points difference now in World Championship terms between Alain Prost, 10.5 points behind Lauda, and Lauda, who is on 1 point now, therefore has been marginally reduced. Alboreto, the Italian, desperately looking for a decent place. He won in Belgium. This is his first year with Ferrari, but he's had a miserable season. 2nd place in Italy, admittedly, and a 3rd in Austria, but he's had no less than 9 failures to finish. Looking out across the forests here in the Eiffel Mountains, as Patrick Tambay, still in 2nd position. Remember, that's where he was for a long time in Italy before he took the lead, and he's keeping ahead there of Nelson Piquet. Is he going to finish? He's still world champion, don't forget. 1st in Canada, 1st in Detroit, 2nd in Austria, but he's failed to finish 10 times. That's Piquet, who is behind this man coming towards us through the chicane, Patrick Tambay. Piquet 3rd. Then 4th, 5th and 6th. Nothing in it, or very little. Warwick, Alboreto, Lauda. Lauda over the line, and that is Patrick Tambay. So the Renaults, with their new high compression engine, which both makes them more economical and faster, and they needed to be both those things, is holding his place excellently. Alain Prost, however, pacing from the front. How do you think things are going, James?
Well, I think Prost will probably be driving as hard as he can with reasonable circumspection, because he'll want to get away. He knows Lauda, he's bound to have been signalled that Lauda is in sixth place and not very far behind. There it is, 13.5 seconds behind. He's having a little bit of trouble getting past Alboreto. This, of course, is where we expected the difficulty to come. The more powerful and quality cars in this field. But and of course now Prost is just starting to get in amongst the back markers, so that's a problem that he's going to have to tread very carefully for. And I think Prost's inside rear tyre. I want to have another look at that, but one of his rear tyres looked a little bit as if it was marking up. But we'll wait till we get a close-up and just see, because if it was only a glance, and I may have just imagined it, but it was the right rear, I think, looked a bit dodgy. Well, I can't see, but I'll keep a look out for that. No, maybe it's not. I think it was just shadow. No, that looks all right, but we'll keep an eye on that.
Prost on Michelin tyres, and they have announced their retirement from Grand Prix racing at the end of this season after a quite incredible season with 12 victories out of the 14 races that have been held so far. And that's caused a major realignment, of course, amongst the tyre companies and the car constructors. So Alain Prost leading comfortably on lap 11, currently on his way to his 6th Grand Prix win of the year. This quite incredible little Frenchman who lives in Switzerland and is now leading Patrick Tambay by some 4.8 seconds, with Tambay now just about 2.5 seconds ahead of Piquet third. Then there's about 5 seconds before Warwick goes through in 4th position.
Well, that same shot at the hairpin, it did look as if his right rear tyre's got a bit of a mark across the middle of the tread. So if that's the case, we'll get a watch on, and at the moment he certainly isn't pulling away from Tambay. There you see Lauda in the background, still unable to find a way around Alboreto, and it will be annoying for him that he's got Warwick right in front of Alboreto, because it's easier to deal with one car than two, because the car that he's trying to pass, i.e. Alboreto, is getting a bit of a slipstream, a bit of a tow from Warwick in front. So it means that he is effectively a little bit quicker down the straights, and that, even though it's only a little bit, it does make a difference.
Lap 12 out of 67, Alain Prost lead, Patrick Tambay second, Nelson Piquet in third position. This is the battle for fourth between Derek Warwick, Michele Alboreto, and number 8 there, Niki Lauda, coming out of the hairpin, climbing towards turn 6, climbing still, then into the left-hander at turn 7. In 7th position, it is still René Arnoux. 8th is Patrese. 9th now is Elio De Angelis, who has got ahead of Eddie Cheever. 10th, 11th is Boutsen. 12th is De Cesaris. 13th is still Johansson. 14th, Nigel Mansell. And the man who is being lapped by all the leaders is the unfortunate Philippe Alliot, the Frenchman in the Ram Heart. I say unfortunate because he has had an awful 2 days here at the Nürburgring, with problem after problem, as a result of which he got hardly any practice laps in, and he was saying this morning that he really doesn't know the course. Warwick is past Alliot, now Alboreto is past Alliot, as is 6th place man number 8 there, Niki Lauda.
Yes, Niki is a little bit stuck at the moment. He's just not able to get quite close enough to Alboreto at any point on the circuit to attack, and he hasn't got the power advantage that he had over some of the other cars earlier in the race. He's in the last lap and a half, he has, as it were, pushed it up a gear, because he's been consistently much closer to him all the way around. So he's definitely looking for a way around. But all the time that he's stuck there, Prost is pulling away, of course, because Niki's being held up. There's no doubt that he can go markedly quicker once he can get past these two. But how quickly he can do that is beginning to look quite doubtful.
Nevertheless, Lauda in 6th position behind Alboreto 5th has driven superbly. He started 15th. He's got ahead of Lafitte, who we've not seen in the race. He's got ahead of Eddie Cheever. Ayrton Senna, who disappeared from our lap charts on lap 1, He got ahead of Boutsen and Farby, who stopped, of course. He got ahead of Patrese and Mansell, and now he's got Warwick, Alboreto, Piquet, Tambay, and the race leader, Alain Prost, ahead of him as they go through and complete another lap, and that is their 13th out of 67 completed.
Yes, it was out of this hairpin that we were just looking at then, the corner before this one, that Niki was doing most of his overtaking in the early laps. But the Ferrari certainly seems to be very good round that hairpin, both in grip round the corner and in acceleration away from it. And Niki's really making no impression at all on him on that point of the circuit, which is certainly the easiest place for overtaking, to do the corner well and just drag. Another fastest lap for Alain Prost. And Elio De Angelis has in fact moved up to 8th place, so he's chasing hard as well.
Alain Prost, as you've just seen, fastest on the circuit, 124.2. That's a speed of 120.2 miles an hour. Significantly slower than Nelson Piquet's pole position. In fact, 8 miles an hour slower. But there's a lot of difference between driving on full tanks and race tires in the race and driving on very soft qualifying rubber and half full or just 5 gallons or so in practice. And Prost goes through and passes the second of the 2 Ram Hart cars, that of Dr. Jonathan Palmer, the British driver who's done so well in sports car racing in the Group C Porsche 956 this year. Just come back from Japan. And Alain Prost on lap 15. And somebody's just pulled off, which it was, I think, Jonathan Palmer who's pulled off, because look, the circuit, yes it was, because the circuit is clear behind the man we're looking at. Prost, the winner in Brazil, and San Marino Moreno from Monaco, Germany and Holland. No, there is Palmer, so it was another competitor that disappeared, and we'll identify him from the lap chart at the completion of this lap. As into turn 7 goes Prost, and into the pits has come Boutsen. But what looks like, from the disorder there, an unscheduled stop, because the Arrows mechanics didn't look altogether happy changing the Goodyear tyres and the wheels on Boutsen's car. Prost coming through.
Well, we'll have another look at Prost's tyres, and they look all right now, and certainly but as you see the centre of his right rear, it is marked a bit. And how long that can last, but in the meantime his car must be pretty healthy, unless Tambay's in trouble. He's put up fastest lap and everything, so despite that little mark on the centre of his right rear tyre, he's still going all right at the moment. But it's a situation that is well worth watching. I'd be surprised if he's having tyre trouble, because he would have surely been pretty conservative in his choice of tyre. There's no reason for him to get all excited and choose very soft, sticky tyres when you can win the race with hard ones.
Alain Prost is increasing the time gap between himself and his teammate Niki Lauda. That is the most significant thing, I think, because it means that if he can keep running and methodically pick off and keep clear of the midfield men that he's currently lapping, he really is going to be in with a chance to win his 6th Grand Prix of the year, and in the process to win 9 vital points, which would mean that Niki Lauda behind him would not win the championship here. Even if Niki Lauda finished higher up than that, there would be a big problem for him. But Prost now is through the field. He's coming up to lap Baldi, Mauro Baldi in the Spirit, who is in 18th position. Prost having already lapped Palmer and Alio, and we've seen him go past both of them. And here he is, past Baldi and up to Joe Gartner in the Acela.
I should report that since those couple of laps when we followed Lauda around very closely, when he was really climbing all over the back of Alboreto's Ferrari, getting as close as he could, he's dropped back a little bit, probably to give himself a little bit of a rest and a breather, but he really seems to be quite stuck behind Alboreto. But what he certainly should be doing is keeping maximum pressure on, if he can. There is Niki, to try and at least force a semi-mistake, a little mistake from Alboreto to enable him to get by, because he's got to do something. He's stuck, and he's lost quite a lot of ground. When he got on the tail of those two, he was some 11 seconds or so behind Prost, and they've managed to halt his progress, and he's now over 20 seconds behind Prost, so he's been quite significantly held up.
Nigel Mansell almost in the points, up into De Angelis rather, up into 7th position as Lauda chases Alboreto. Derek Warwick just getting a bit of a oversteer, a bit of a flick there on the right-hand side of the car. And I say again, Elio De Angelis is up into 7th place. He's got ahead of him now on lap 17. Piquet there, who is 3rd. Warwick, Alboreto, Lauda, 4th, 5th and 6th. And, of course, the leader, Alain Prost, and the 2nd place man, Patrick Tambay. Nearly 20 seconds now, so Alain Prost, as they go past the old Nürburgring historic grandstand, which has been... And Arnoux challenging Warwick. Derek Warwick, he's a very tough, determined competitor, is Derek, and he's going to take a lot of passing. But Arnoux, Alboreto.
Yes, Warwick took the inside as soon as he saw things coming out. Nicky's having a look now, and it's really warming up this dice. I think Nicky would be very pleased to see Alboreto get past Warwick. I think he feels he'd have more chance of getting past Warwick, but he needs something to develop, and that would be better than nothing. Obviously, ideally, he can get past Alboreto himself. And, of course, if the two in front start fighting, that, because they'll be watching each other and slowing each other down, that will increase Nicky's chances of a gap opening for him.
Currently, Alain Prost has reduced the deficit from 10.5 points to 2.5 points. If both he and Lauda finish where they are now, that is to say in 1st and 6th places, because Prost started this race 10.5 points behind Niki Lauda in the World Championship. He's currently on 9 points. Lauda is on 1 point, but I think Lauda is going to go through soon. He's really pushing Alboreto in front of him. Johansson has called into the pit, Stefan Johansson in the Tolman Hart, who was in 3rd position. And as Warwick, Alboreto and Lauda go through, 4th, 5th and 6th, completing their 18th lap, it is Prost leading, Tambay 2nd, Piquet 3rd, then a gap of 7 seconds to the battle you're seeing now for 4th position between Derek Warwick in the Renault, Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari, Niki Lauda in the McLaren. Lauda forcing Alboreto on to Warwick, who has to keep both of them behind him. Derek Warwick, who has driven quite superbly for the Renault team, which he joined this year, led in Brazil, finished 2nd in Belgium and at the British Grand Prix, 3rd in South Africa and Germany, and 4th in the San Marino race, but with 9 failures to finish, is only in 6th position in the World Championship.
An interesting point I've just noticed, and that is that Prost is no longer pulling away from the battle which we're now looking. Now, he was quicker than them, and I don't suppose, there's no reason to suppose that Warwick and Alboreto have speeded up, which does make me think he's pulled a tiny bit, but he's not pulling out as fast as he was, so it just means that we've got to keep watching that right rear tyre on Prost's car.
He's gaining very little at the present moment, but a bit. Warwick, Alboreto, Lauda, 4th, 5th and 6th, respectively on 3, 2 and 1 World Championship points. The heavy rain cloud, which looked as though it was going to be forming over the new Nürburgring here in the Eifel Mountains, has cleared away. The sky is totally blue. The flags are waving, and there's quite a stiff wind blowing, and you can see the sun is shining from the moving shadow under Niki Lauda's McLaren as he chases Michele Alboreto and Derek Warwick. And still on lap 20 in this 67 lap, 189.1 mile race, it's Prost, Tambay, Piquet, Warwick, Alboreto, Lauda, De Angelis in 7th position, Arnoux is 8th. There is the race leader. I've started my stopwatch and I'll give you the gap. between Alain Prost, who's going down into turn 1 and then turn 2, starting to drop down to the hairpin. I'll give you the gap between him and the battle for 4th when Derek Warwick goes through. Tambay and Piquet have already done so, as Prost is now onto the Hatzenbogen, up to the chicane, and the gap is 23 seconds now. So Prost is actually pulling away now from that tight battle for 4th position between Warwick, Alboreto and Lauda. The positions are static in the top 6, but Prost is demonstrating the quite incredible speed superiority that he has actually had all season, even though both he and Niki Lauda for McLaren have had 5 victories each, making 10 out of the 14 Grand Prix that have been held so far this year, with just 1 to go after this one. Warwick. Sorry, that was Tambay, and here is Nelson Piquet in an unaccustomedly low for him 3rd position, the man who won in Canada and Detroit, 2nd in Austria, but those 10 failures to finish ruined Piquet's chances of repeating his World Championship from last year. The gap between Tambay and Piquet is almost exactly 3 seconds as we wait now for Warwick, and there he is as we look at Mauro Baldi in the Spirit Heart, the turbocharged car, who is behind Joe Gartner and is about to be lapped by the 4th, 5th and 6th place men, Warwick, Alboreto and of course Niki Lauda.
And this, of course, now we've got a couple of back markers in front of this battle for 4th place, and Niki Lauda should be steeling himself to get very close so that if the back markers confuse either of the cars in front of him, he can be in a position to nip through. This is a tense and big moment for Lauda. He's already struggled for many laps now to get past without success. This is a potential chance, and he must be ready for it.
Joe Gartner, the leader of these 5, although he's a lap behind, in fact, if you follow me, is only in his 7th Grand Prix, an ex-Formula 2 driver, famous for being difficult to pass. So if Gartner gets rattled by seeing 3 cars forming up behind Baldi, who's immediately behind him, as James says, this could dramatically change the pattern of the race as Warwick catches Baldi and is passing him now as they come up to the chicane. Baldi moves across and lets Warwick through, but blocks, as he's got to get through the corner, Michele Alboreto, but Michele Alboreto goes through, and now Lauda spins off, because Niki Lauda there just got it wrong, coming up behind, and he's lost a lot of time.
He's all right, he kept his engine running. Well, that was a big moment for Lauda, and well driven in a way. He was having a go to pass, but he's back in the race, and he'll soon... He didn't lose a great deal of time. It won't take him long to recatch that group, but that is a major problem. Here we see it again. Now, Lauda is trying to get inside Alboreto. He's going a bit quick. He locks the rear wheels, loses the back of the car. No grip at all there, and it was just a little bit of over-anxiousness, but he kept it cool and he kept the engine running, because if he'd lost his engine, he would have been out of the race. A push start, and there we are. He's rejoined with De Angelis right behind, but I think he'll be able to pull away from De Angelis so long as he hasn't damaged his tyres. Of course, you can put flat spots on the tyres with them locked up like that and spinning, and they tend to go around a bit like the old threepenny bit when they got flat spots on, and that could be nasty. But hopefully that was a low enough speed spin that it shouldn't be a problem.
And it demonstrated, incidentally, the quite incredible reflexes that racing drivers have got, because you will have noticed Niki Lauda coolly looking to the left and the right as he spun through 360 degrees to make sure he had got the car placed properly on the circuit, coolly to select a gear and motor away, and he's just ahead now of the 7th place man Elio De Angelis, but pulling away from him because the gap, and Lauda clouted the curve there, and he's lost a bit of time and distance. And again, Elio De Angelis in the JPS Lotus with its V6 Renault engine is closing on Niki Lauda, the double ex-world champion, with Alain Prost consolidating his lead. Here he is on lap 24, from Patrick Tambay second, Nelson Piquet third, Derek Warwick fourth, Alboreto fifth, Lauda sixth with De Angelis seventh right behind him. Then Arnoux eighth, Patrese and Chiva ninth and 10th in the Alfa Romeos. Nigel Mansell in 11th place and Andrea De Cesaris in the Ligier in 12th position, with Philippe Alliot bringing up the rear in 20th place, and he has already been lapped twice on the 24th lap. Enormous pressure, of course, on both Prost and Lauda, but Prost now, with a comfortable cushion of nearly 11 seconds, can really concentrate on ensuring that he takes the smoothest possible way round the new Nürburgring, keeps well clear of the curves, takes his time within reason about getting past tail enders in general, to drive a cautious and safe race, to keep himself in the running and in the process on his way to his 6th victory. And if he does that with 9 points, the World Championship really will be going down to Estoril in Portugal on October the 21st. A quite magnificent circuit, incidentally. There's Jonathan Palmer. He's going to be caught and passed by Alain Prost very shortly. Jonathan is in 19th position. We're missing Jacques Lafitte, of course. We're missing... no, Jacques Lafitte is in 13th position. We just haven't seen him. We're certainly missing Keke Rosberg as Prost goes up to challenge and pass Jonathan Palmer in the Hatzenbogen section through into the chicane, which is actually a lot tighter than it looks, into the last right-hander, the Roma curve. And it's Prost, Tambay, Piquet, as you see the positions there, and behind Niki Lauda, there's just over a second between him and the 7th place man De Angelis, with Arnoux, Patrese and Chiva following.
Well, now we have an interesting situation to see if Lauda can actually lap quicker than Alain Prost. We see he's 40 seconds almost exactly behind Prost, or was when they went respectively over the start-finish line then. He's got some clear air in front of him, apart from back markers, because he's some 11 seconds or so behind Alboreto. So it'll be an opportunity to see if he can, how quickly he can close that gap, and how good his base. For goodness gracious me, all sorts of weaving about there, and eyebrows raised, and that won't please Nicky, having to sit there as a spectator. If they're behaving like that, it'll probably slow him down and make him rather nervous.
Yes, it's the dreaded Joe Gartner, I'm afraid, but Baldi is past him, having determinedly weaved from left to right, and now Niki Lauda is past the fellow Austrian. There's 3 Austrians in this race. There are 2 of them, Niki Lauda and Joe Gartner, and the third is Gerhard Berger.
And I saw a JPS pulling off in the very far background there, and it looked, I would imagine, from the position on the road, it might be Elio De Angelis in trouble. Seemed to be just pulling off and parking right in the background of that last picture.
Yeah, Elio De Angelis third in the championship. He lost all chances of winning the championship in Italy. He was there with a mathematical chance at Monza, but he lost it. And now Niki Lauda is up with Mauro Baldi, the Italian, who's seeing the McLaren distinctive colours and shape in his mirrors, courteously moves over. There's no point in trying to stop Niki Lauda from passing. There would be no benefit to Mauro Baldi from doing so. And we're now on lap 27 as Niki Lauda goes through to complete his 26th. And he really has got a Herculean task, because he's lost touch now, as you can well see, with Alboreto 5th and Warwick in 4th place.
Yes, but visually he appears now to be the quickest man on the circuit, and there he's pulled a second back, nearly 8/10 of a second on Prost in that last lap. So he is the quickest man on the track at the moment, and I would expect, if all is healthy, to see a fastest lap caption for him coming up in due course.
It was Elio De Angelis. That's his 4th failure to finish in the 14th Grand Prix of the 15th Grand Prix of the year. He's had a wonderfully consistent season, but it wasn't to continue here in Germany, and Elio De Angelis in the JPS Lotus is out of the race. That's removed one problem anyway, as far as Niki Lauda is concerned, although Lauda was pulling away. So there is René Arnoux, and Arnoux has now got the two Alfa Romeos of Patrese and Chiva running very quickly and reliably, but will they last the distance on their fuel? They normally run out. He's got them right behind him. And René Arnoux is now in 7th position now that De Angelis has disappeared. Patrese is 8th, Chiva is 9th. You're looking at the leader, Alain Prost, on his 28th lap. That is Elio De Angelis's JPS Lotus being dragged away by the very efficient German ONS marshalling system. That's not the driver, the man in the red overalls. He's a member of the ONS, and there's Rosberg.
The feet and smoking a bit, and in fact he's coming into the pits. Yeah, I saw a bit of smoke out of his, yes, smoking quite a lot actually. Well, Alain Prost, meantime, I said just now that Lauda was catching Prost, which indeed he was for a couple of laps, but Prost has in fact responded and is holding station at least with Niki on the road. The gap is back around 40 seconds.
Sorry about that, Jacques and Keke. Keke Rosberg disappeared some time ago, and the Williams team were desperately looking for finishes today from Keke Rosberg and Jacques Lafitte, and it doesn't look as though either of them is going to do so, because whatever was wrong with Jacques Lafitte looked like turbo or engine, in which case the Honda has given way again, and he is out of the race. Niki Lauda through. And he has got ahead of the Ram Heart of Philippe Alliot, who will now have been lapped 3 times in 28 laps. The Ram Heart really doesn't handle all that well. It's got a very high fuel load, which makes it difficult to flick from corner to corner. And Alliot, as I said earlier on, is most unhappy about his lack of knowledge of the new Nürburgring due to the fact that he got hardly any practice. He had so many problems with the turbo primarily. And Niki Lauda then now, the man we look at, still in 6th position, still in the points, but he is some 12 seconds now behind Michele Alboreto, and he is some 40 seconds behind Alain Prost. It's the McLaren story again, because Prost won in Brazil, Lauda won in South Africa, then Prost won in San Marino, followed by Lauda in France, followed by Prost at Monaco. Then we had a bit of a gap at the Canadian Detroit and Dallas Grand Prix, but McLaren were back at the front in Britain with Niki Lauda winning, to be followed in Germany by Prost at Hockenheim, to be followed in Austria by Lauda, which was where the World Championship position changed, with Lauda taking over from Prost. Then in Holland it was Alain Prost again. Then for the 5th time this year, to match the number of wins of his teammate Alain Prost, Niki Lauda won in Italy. And it looks at the present moment as though, car trouble accepted, Alain Prost is going to make it 6, and with 9 points to the 1 of Niki Lauda. The gap between them at this race would be 8 points. Take that away from 10.5, and it means only a 2.5 point lead for that man, number 8, Niki Lauda at Estoril. And if indeed FISA give Prost an extra point at their meeting next week because of the Tyrrell situation and losing their points, it would mean that there would be only 1.5 points between the two McLaren drivers, making for a really exciting and dramatic situation at the last Grand Prix of the year. Up to the chicane. Behind, further down the field, Nigel Mansell is really charging. Elio De Angelis out, but Nigel Mansell is now in 10th position, right up with René Arnoux in the Ferrari, who is 7th, Patrese and Chiva in the Alfa Romeos, who are 8th and 9th. As through to complete another lap goes Niki Lauda, having passed Jonathan Palmer in the 2nd Ram, and you saw the enormous heat haze that comes from the back of these cars with their turbocharged engines.
Yes, you also saw as they went round the hairpin there, the vastly superior grip of the McLaren over Jonathan Palmer's Ram, because Lauda was just able to tuck on the inside, just drive past it basically, with much more grip as Jonathan was sliding wide and fighting for grip. So that was a very clear demonstration of the difference in road holding capability of those two chassis.
Nigel Mansell up to 9th position ahead of Eddie Cheever as Alain Prost goes through to complete his 31st lap. Fastest lap is Alain Prost, 1:24.18, a speed of 120.69. Alain Prost totally in command. Here he is. Let's watch him. 29 years old, 15 years racing experience, ex-Formula Renault champion in France, then Formula Renault champion of Europe, Formula 3 champion of Europe, then he drove for the McLaren team in 1980, finished 5th in his first Grand Prix in Spain, went on to join the Renault team with whom he was for the 3 years 80, 81, 82 and 83, a large number of victories. Left in disgust because he was dissatisfied at the end of the season with the car, and my goodness, look how successful he's been.
I think at this stage of the race, Lauda will have, because of the spin and the time that he's lost, probably have readjusted his sights. And I think now that obviously his immediate sights are just to catch the people in front and pass them, but I think now he'll be very, very keen to get at least 3 points. So he wants to finish 4th, so he's got to get back up to that dice with Warwick and Alboreto that he was following and get past them, because those 3 points, if he can get them, will mean that Prost can't beat him for the championship in Estoril by winning with Nicky coming second. So what it means is that Nicky can follow Prost and still win the championship, whereas if he has less points than that, particularly with this problem coming up in Paris, he's in a situation where he could follow Prost home and lose, and of course that will make a big difference to him, because it would make the race much easier for him in Estoril. So he'd be very keen, I think, to capture a minimum of 3 points, and those are where his sights should be set.
He's going to have an enormous task to do it. He's 45 seconds now behind the race leader, Alain Prost. Well, 44 seconds according to that. And you can see the gap between Alboreto and Lauda is 10 seconds. So Nicky has got to remorselessly gain 10 seconds from Lauda, then get past him, then get to the 4th man, Derek Warwick, and then get past him to get to the position which James has ideally indicated Nicky Lauda will be trying for. So he's got a big job. There is Nelson Piquet, and Teo Fabi, his teammate, is still running after that trouble he had at the beginning of the race. He's in 16th position, and as we look at Patrick Tambay second, it is on lap 34 out of 67. Prost the leader, Tambay there in 2nd position, coming towards us. You'll see Nelson Piquet, there he is in 3rd position. The gap between Piquet and Tambay is greater than it looks on your screen. It's some 5 seconds. Warwick 4th, Alboreto 5th, Lauda 6th, Arnoux 7th, Patrese 8th, Nigel Mansell now 9th, he's got ahead of Cheever 10th, De Cesaris is 11th, Boutsen is 12th, and Boutsen has been lapped. So Prost has lapped everybody up to the 11th man, Andrea De Cesaris, and Prost is now on his 34th lap. There's the difference, as you see, nearly 18 seconds between Prost and Tambay. As we look at the 3rd place man, Nelson Piquet, BMW, whose engine powers the Parmalat Brabham, have been working very, very hard indeed during the last 4 weeks to make their engine more reliable. And we see Nigel Mansell. There is Patrese passing Palmer with Cheever behind him, and Nigel Mansell now in 8th position is right up behind Arnoux. So Nigel Mansell's got ahead of both the Alfa Romeos. There he is. There's Patrese in the multicoloured Stars and Stripes helmet. Was Cheever, and we're back again now with the leader on his 35th lap, Alain Prost, again lapping Philippe Alliot, whose cup of misery is full to overflowing here at the Nürburgring. Doesn't know what he's going to do next season, wants to stay in Formula One, doesn't know whether he will be able to, or if he will be able to stay with the Ram team, which incidentally has been joined by the extremely talented German designer Gustav Brunner, ex-Alfa Romeo and ATS, who is designing a new Ram car for John McDonnell's team to be powered by the Hart engine next season.
Gehalten wir übrigens die Kunde, dass 60.000 Zuschauer diesem großen Preis von Europa auf dem Nürburgring beiwohnen. 60.000 Zuschauer, das bedeutet, dass jeder zweite Platz zwar leer geblieben ist, dass aber der Veranstalter genau auf seine Kosten gekommen ist. 5 Millionen brauchte er, 3,1 Millionen, ich sagte es schon, kassiert allein Bernie Ecclestone für seine Formel-1-Fahrer und für die Rennsteller. Mit der 9, das ist Philippe Alliot, der 30-jährige Franzose aus Reims. In Reims, wo ja früher auch noch Formel-1-Rennen gefahren wurden. Alain Prost, fraglos der wesentlich erfolgreichere der beiden Franzosen. Dreimal hat Prost in diesem Jahr die Pole Position des Trainings schnellsten erreichen können. 8-mal übrigens Piquet. Das brachte ihm nicht viel. Prost hat daraus mehr gemacht. Und heute mit seinem zweiten Startplatz ist er ja schon in die erste Kurve nach dem Start als führender Mann hineingegangen und hat diese Führung bisher souverän behauptet, ja sogar ausgebaut. Lauda. Immer wieder durch unsere Kameras hervorragend eingefangen. Das Wechselspiel zwischen dem führenden Mann und Niki Lauda, dem großen Konkurrenten des führenden Mannes Alain Prost. Nur diese beiden können noch Weltmeister werden. Lauda mit den besseren Karten auf den Titel, heute mit den schlechteren Karten im Rennen. Die Reihenfolge nach 35 Runden, also mehr als der Hälfte der Distanz.
Alain Prost driving smoothly, steadily, lap 37. He's gone round the hairpin. He's coming up now to the shell curve, climbing in 5th gear down to 4th for turn 7. Down the little short straight into the right-hander at turn 8, drops downhill. Very wet there in practice, and a lot of drivers are having trouble keeping control of their cars. This is the about 180-mile-an-hour section at the Hatzenbogen, which leads into the 4th gear chicane, left, right, down to a mere 155 miles an hour into 2nd gear for the Roma curve, which he exits now behind Mauro Baldi in the Spirit and takes him down the straight, going into the right-hander at turn 1. Excellent racing conditions. The wind has died down a bit. The sun is still brightly shining. The sky is still blue. And those spectators who are crowding the enormous stand overlooking the finishing straight, not so many of them in other parts of the circuit, are seeing an intriguing European Grand Prix, with the World Championship being kept bright and alive by the relative positions of Alain Prost there, number 7, the race leader, and his teammate Niki Lauda in 6th position. 8 points between them at the moment in this race, which means to say that the World Championship differential at the moment is 2.5 points, and it could be 1.5 if, as I have said before, the governing body of the sport decide to give Alain Prost a point from the Tyrrell disappearance, to put it politely. Niki Lauda, 7 seconds, just over 7 seconds you see there, and behind Lauda in 6th position is René Arnoux, and there's a very lumpy engine sounding, disappearing in the distance there. It's Cheever. I can't believe that Cheever is out of fuel already, which is his normal malady in the Alfa Romeo, because this is only lap 38, and he normally lasts until about 5 from the end. But he had engine trouble in the warm-up period this morning, and I would think that Eddie Cheever, who was in 10th position behind Patrese and Mansell, 8th and 9th, sorry, 9th and 8th respectively, is not going to be seen again at the Nürburgring this year anyway. Coming into the pits as we look at Niki Lauda is Jonathan Palmer in the Ram Hart. And we've seen very little. There is Jonathan Palmer with Mick Ralph on the left, bending over him in the green and white jacket. And in the background, Alan Campbell, the brake technician. Jonathan visor up, sitting there quietly. He's obviously deciding his race is running. It looks to me as though his safety belts are being undone so that he can get out. Yes, Jonathan Palmer is out of the European Grand Prix, and Nigel Mansell is driving a storming race in 8th position, because he's now right up with René Arnoux, who's 7th.
Yes, unfortunately, yes, he's been there for some laps, and it's the old problem. It does seem that between evenly matched cars being well driven, overtaking is really an excessive problem here. This, of course, being a new track, first Grand Prix that's been run, we're all still learning about it, as indeed are the drivers out there. But it seems to me that if any criticism was to be levelled at it, that would certainly be one. It's essential in this days, when you start with a clean sheet of paper to design a track for Grand Prix racing, to have a decent straight entered at reasonably high speed where the cars can get a bit of a slipstream and pass each other. It's and preferably with a slow corner at the end of it so that they can do a bit of outbraking. You must have passing places for these cars.
The top 6 are well spread out now. There's still 44 seconds between Alain Prost and Niki Lauda. There's the confirmation of it in the caption. Patrick Tambay in the Renault, still going strong. There's the race leader, is 16 seconds behind Prost. And Patrick Tambay is 8 seconds now in front of Nelson Piquet, who looks to me to be struggling a bit. By the way, Jonathan Palmer's engine has given up the ghost. That's why he's retired. Nelson Piquet doesn't look to me to be at all happy. I don't know whether he's lost a gear or whether his tyres are going off, but he's definitely going a lot slower than he was, and he's now some 10 seconds ahead of Derek Warwick only, who's in 4th position. Michele Alboreto is right with Warwick. That's the most exciting scrap in the top 6 as we look at Niki Lauda in that 6th position. And Nigel Mansell, unseen by you, seen by us, is past René Arnoux' Ferrari and up into 7th place. Now the gap between Lauda, who is 6th, and Mansell, who is now in 7th position, is some 23 seconds. So whether Nigel Mansell will be able to get in the points, I think, frankly, depends on whether any of the 6 people ahead of him strike trouble, because it's a tall order for Nigel Mansell to take 6 seconds out of Niki Lauda, Alboreto, Warwick, Piquet, Tambay, Prost, who is, of course, leading on lap 41. There he is. And what will history say about the first Grand Prix to be held at the Nürburgring? Well, it's yet to be finished, as now, my goodness, what a dreadful race for the Ram team, because with Jonathan Palmer out, there is Philippe Alliot, the Frenchman. He will not be remembering his visit to Germany in October of 1984 with much affection, because he was quite the most miserable man in the pit lane during practice, and now he's out of the race in a situation where he was 3 laps, getting on for 4 laps behind the race leaders when he retired, as he has now done. And coming towards us, the Ligier of Andre de Cesaris. That is the new Ligier. You can tell it by the peculiar camel hump appearance at the front of the car. It's got new side pods, new radiator layout, new front suspension, new rear suspension. And Andre de Cesaris has been lapped. He's in 10th position. And as we look at Prost on lap 42, reliably thus far and steadily driving on, that was Fabi. The race order on lap 42 is Prost leading, Tambay second, Piquet third, Warwick fourth, Alboreto fifth, Lauda sixth, Mansell seventh, Arnoux in 8th position, Patrese 9th, and then Andre de Cesaris 10th and has been lapped, as has Thierry Boutsen in 11th position, Theo Fabi in 12th position. François Hainaut, who is 13th, has been lapped twice, as has Mauro Baldi in 14th place, Gartner 15th, Eddie Cheever is, I think, out of the race because, yes, he is, Eddie Cheever is out, as is Alio, Palmer, Lafitte, De Angelis, Senna, and Keke Rosberg. And this, whilst we look at the race leader, is a good opportunity not only to pay a tribute to, and Tambay is going through, and this is a development because Tambay has now got Nelson Piquet right with him. I said that I thought Piquet was going slower. Well, he was, but Patrick Tambay is now in the position of seeing Nelson Piquet and going through, and Nelson Piquet on lap 43 takes second position from Patrick Tambay in the Renault. So now it is Prost leading, Piquet second, Tambay third, Warwick fourth, Alboreto fifth, and Lauda sixth. The gap between Prost and Piquet is some 24 seconds.
Yes, well, that appears to be the first of the leading group of cars to get into any sort of trouble. And here's the new fastest lap for Niki Lauda of 23.9 on the 42nd lap. So Lauda would appear to be the fastest man on the circuit. And Lauda might quite reasonably have felt a bit aggrieved that with 2/3 of the Grand Prix completed, not one of the main protagonists of the quicker runners in front of him has broken down or had any mechanical trouble. But it appears that Tambay is correcting that for him. But whether he'll go, we can't obviously as yet guess at what Patrick's trouble is, whether it's just slowing him down a bit or whether it's terminal.
I think there's the answer, because with Derek Warwick and Alboreto now still in 4th and 5th positions and the race leader, Alain Prost, Patrick Tambay is dropping back from Nelson Piquet, or was at that point. So it could well be that we're going to see a new change for the new 3rd position shortly, with Warwick and Alboreto right up with the Frenchman Patrick Tambay. Tambay looking very much for another finish, having failed to finish in 7 of the Grand Prix that have been held so far this year. Although he had a good 2nd place in France and a 5th and a couple of 6ths, he is well down the championship by his standards. The man who has won 2 Grand Prix in his career, Patrick Tambay, both of them for Ferrari. He's only in 10th place in the World Championship. And you're looking down now at the hairpin, the lowest point of the course. You're looking across at turn 7 shortly as Niki Lauda goes into it. Then he will drop down onto this section that we're looking at now, the exit from the Hatzenbogen into the Vidal chicane, down to the Roma curve, the 2nd gear corner, and going through now was Mauro Baldi. Here is Nelson Piquet, and you can see there's a big gap. Now, the gap between Nelson Piquet and Patrick Tambay is enormous, because now Warwick is up to 3rd and Alboreto is up to 4th. Down to 5th has gone Patrick Tambay, and his engine is definitely very rough.
And Lauda was right on his tail, so Lauda is about to take 5th place, and Lauda is now getting quite close to Warwick and Alboreto. So this race that got a bit dull in the middle, the leading group were all well spread out, has suddenly come alive again. I think we can reasonably write Tombe off. He was losing too much time per lap to look as if he's going to feature in the points. But you see Lauda only 1 second behind him, and Lauda's only 5 seconds behind Alboreto and Warwick, of course, who are battling together and have been stuck in that position throughout the race. And this has got to be a criticism of the circuit that Alboreto, without any doubt, is a little bit quicker than Derek Warwick on the day, but he just can't get past him. And that, whilst passing was expected to be difficult in Grand Prix racing, it really shouldn't be impossible. And Lauda had the same trouble, remember. He got up with that battle. There was nothing he could do for lap after lap until the excitement when he tried to capitalise on a back marker and as a result made his own mistake.
I am just starting my stopwatch on Nelson Piquet because Lauda was, at the last count, the fastest man on the circuit. Here is Derek Warwick in the new third position with Michele Alboreto fourth right behind him. And I suspect that Nelson Piquet, who is now really charging with the chance of catching, if he keeps at it, Alain Prost, although it's a pretty slim chance, is the fastest man, I believe, on the circuit, as into the pits at the end of the 45th lap comes Patrick Tambay. There he is, Patrick Tambay, who was second here for so long. There's Warwick with Alboreto right behind him, third and fourth, and the Renault mechanics and technicians gather around Patrick Tambay's V6 car. Another indication, I'm afraid, of the fact that this has been a quite dreadful season too for the Renault team, who for the first time, if my memory serves me right, since they won in 1979, look to be in the position of not winning a Grand Prix. Now there is Prost. I wonder what the gap is between him and Nelson Piquet. Prost is quite alone on the circuit. There's a lot of people out now, of course, including Palmer, Alliot, Lafitte, De Angelis, Senna.
So I think Piquet's bigger threat, if there is any, is from behind. He's not really catching Prost, but Niki Lauda is some 12 seconds or a bit less behind Piquet. But what is to Piquet's big advantage, of course, is he's got that wall, namely Warwick and Alboreto, to protect him from any attack from behind by Lauda. There's the gap between the two leaders, half a minute, and Prost is all set to take a very comfortable 9 points. He will now already be thinking about easing things up, looking after the car mechanically. I'm sure he won't be trying to increase his lead. If anything, he'll be reducing the gap and turning down his boost, saving his fuel, looking after everything he can. His tyres appear to be perfectly all right. If they last this long, they're going to go okay. So really, Prost's main interest will be what places Lauda can pick up. He is now in 5th place and worth 2 points, which is a good thing, because that, in the worst situation, will give him 2.5 points difference if Prost gets a favourable ruling in Paris.
Nelson Piquet is catching Prost. Now, those of you who are Brabham and Piquet fans, and there he is, don't start firing the victory maroons, because although he is catching Alain Prost, he's still over 28 seconds behind him, and it may well be because Alain Prost is going slower rather than because Piquet here is going quicker. But in the closing, well, not quite the closing stages, this is lap 48, it's a 67-lap race. We'll keep an eye on the gap between number 1, world champion Nelson Sotomayor, which is his real name. Nelson Piquet was his mother's maiden name, which he used to disguise the fact that he was racing in his early days, knowing that his parents wouldn't approve of it. But he's long past that. They approve of it very much, I suspect, now. And Nelson Piquet, as he is now known and always has been in his racing career, really charging in second place, trying to catch the race leader Prost, who has now passed Riccardo Patrese Alfa Romeo there. Patrese in 8th position, and on lap 49 now, there is the race leader, Alain Prost, ahead of Nelson Piquet by some 29 seconds. Warwick 3rd, Alboreto 4th, Lauda 5th on 2 points. Nat Mansell is up into 6th position because he's ahead of René Arnoux. And in 7th position then is the Frenchman in the Ferrari, René Arnoux. 8th Patrese, who you've just seen lapped. 9th De Cesaris, 10th Boutsen, and that's it.
And things are hotting up now from 2nd to 5th place because Lauda is concertinaing his way up. He's now pretty much in touch with Alboreto's car, and of course therefore with Warwick, because they've been in line astern throughout the race, and Piquet is not very far in front of them. So Lauda, if he can do some overtaking, does still stand a real chance of 2nd place, although it's in practice I think fairly unlikely, because we've seen that overtaking is so difficult. But of course towards the end of the race, with the fuel consumption formula that we have, the fireworks, and
well, Nelson Piquet securely ensconced in 2nd position. Lauda still the fastest man on the circuit and going faster all the time, albeit just a little bit faster because his previous was 121 miles an hour. And I'm watching here at the start and finish point as Piquet is right on the tail now of Andrea De Cesaris, the young and very determined Italian. And there is Niki Lauda, and the gap between Lauda is 2.4 seconds between Lauda and Alboreto.
And Warwick's gone. Warwick's going into the pits. And there is... Oh, it's Tom Baines, I beg your pardon, my mistake. Tom Baines has gone out. He had electrical trouble, and they fixed it and sent him out again, but he's obviously got it back. Apologies for getting overexcited.
Yes, they fixed it and unfixed it because Tombay is now into the garage for yet another retirement, yet another miserable race for Renault. So there was Piquet, who has got ahead of De Cesaris, and just let's check again on lap 50 as you see Piquet drive out of the picture, followed by De Cesaris. It's Prost leading now by 28 seconds, nearly 29 from Piquet. Alboreto is 3rd, ahead of Warwick now. Did you mark that? Michele Alboreto has gone ahead of Derek Warwick. He's in 3rd position, and Niki Lauda is right up with the Englishman, who is in 4th position. Prost, Piquet, Alboreto, Warwick, Lauda, with Nigel Mansell some 30 seconds behind in 6th place, but in the points. Piquet has gone through in 2nd position at the end of his 50th lap. Alboreto is through, and the gap between Alboreto and Lauda now, there is Alboreto, is 4.2 seconds.
Yes, and Niki, I think, will be pleased to see that Alboreto has finally got past Warwick, because he was unable to pass Alboreto when he had plenty of time to try earlier, and so he may feel that he's got a better chance of dealing with Derek Warwick. But if he wants to pick up further places other than Warwick's, he's going to have to get a wiggle on, because he's beginning to run out of distance. We've got some 17 laps to go, and with overtaking being as difficult as it is here, he'll want to attack Warwick pretty aggressively, I would think.
We are looking at Michele Alboreto. No, we're not. We're looking at Alain Prost, who's gone through to complete his 51st lap now out of 67, and only mechanical problems can stop Prost from winning this race. Nelson Piquet still nearly half a minute behind the Frenchman, and the interest, as James has said, is will Niki Lauda catch Warwick and get past him? Will Niki Lauda catch Alboreto and get past him? I think that's the best that the great Austrian can sensibly hope to do, to finish in 3rd position, which would give him 4 points. Nelson Piquet has just completed his 51st lap, and we wait now for Alboreto to go through. He does so. The gap between Alboreto and Warwick, which was 4.2 seconds, is now 5.4 seconds. So as the cameraman goes berserk and we look back down the course, we see, who do we see? We see the Ligier there, and we see a couple of marshals vehicles, the ambulance on the right and the course car on the left. And now we wait at the chicane, and we see Thierry Boutsen going through in the arrows. And now we're up with what the cameraman was looking for, which is René Arnoux, followed by Thierry Boutsen. Arnoux having passed Joe Gartner in the Osella. And the Ferraris are going well by their 1984 standards, because Alboreto is in third position, René Arnoux is in fourth place. It is lap 52. As you see, Alboreto is now the fastest man on the course, with a time of 1:23.3, nearly 122 miles an hour. And it...
Yes, and that's markedly quicker than either of the McLarens have been able to go hitherto, and that must underline once again just how much quicker Alboreto was and how badly held up he's been by Derek Warwick for the race. Not that that's any blame on Warwick, that's a blame on the blame rests with the design of the circuit. But must be very frustrating for Ferrari, because that's probably their best performance this season. Alboreto is at this stage of a Grand Prix the fastest man on the circuit, and I don't think we've seen a Ferrari that competitive this late in a race. They looked good, of course, at Monza in the previous Grand Prix. That was a very good performance from them, and they're confirming it now. But so I think Lauda can wave bye-bye to any thoughts of passing Alboreto, but Warwick should be plenty for him to get his teeth into between now and the end of the race anyway. And I think when all is said and done, if he can get past Warwick, get fourth place and 3 points, he's not about to be thrilled, but he can be very well satisfied. There are much worse fates.
Nigel Mansell off and out, and that's hard luck, because he was on his way for a point, and he's trying to get a fire marshal, I think, because it looks to me, yes, the back of the JPS Lotus is smoking badly, and you can see the turbo is on fire, and up arrives the fire marshal in the very nick of time to save the car from going up in flames. The turbo, of course, is absolutely red hot. This is lap 54, and Alboreto is really catching Nelson Piquet. He's well within sight. In fact, there's only about a couple of seconds in it between second and third places. Race leader there, Alain Prost, on lap 54. 13 laps to go in this 67-lap race. The excitement and interest now is twofold. Can Alboreto keep ahead? Can Alboreto catch Nelson Piquet? And can Niki Lauda, who is in fifth place, improve his position and thereby his chance of getting the World Championship at Estoril, because he's certainly not going to get it here as the race is going at the present moment. And Niki Lauda is right up with Warwick now. There's the second of these two cars is Warwick.
Yes, and Lauda will be pleased with the back marker in front. That is potentially to his advantage in getting past Warwick, and he's in good attacking position now. He was quicker out of the hairpin, but of course this is a very quick S behind. There's no real braking, and that's the problem. These straights are so short that a mistake, you can get away with the mistake by the time you get to the next corner, the other guy hasn't really had time to do anything about it. So Lauda, they're safely past the back marker. He got nicely and gentlemanly out of the way to let the major antagonists get on with it. But very, very important fight here for Niki. He's got to find a way round, and up here going into the last corner is where into the hairpin, but Warwick's very quick into that, and Niki certainly isn't close enough this time, although he's quicker out of it.
And now Alboreto is exactly 2 seconds behind Piquet, who is second, as Lauda again right under the rear wing of Warwick's car in fourth position. Warwick, Lauda in fifth on 2 points. If he can get up that extra place, it'll give him 3 points in the World Championship. We've got two tight battles in the first 6 now. Prost on his own, Piquet and Alboreto fighting for second place, and this battle for fourth between Warwick in the yellow Renault, Lauda in the McLaren, and Arnoux in the second Ferrari is sixth.
Terribly, terribly important, this extra point for Niki, because if Prost gets a favourable ruling in Paris that Murray's already explained about, and Niki's having a look, he's having a look, and Warwick makes himself pretty wide. He wasn't giving any quarter there, but I see smoke in the background. I don't know what that is, but that, of course, can't be one of the cars we're really interested in, because this is what we're really interested. He needs to be more than 3 points ahead of Prost, you see, going into Estoril, so that if to win the championship, he can follow him home. And if Prost gains a point in Paris this week, he'll be half a point. Oh, and Nicky's got it coming out inside, and Warwick really made a mess there. I think Warwick may be in a little bit of trouble, but he made a terrible mess of that corner, and Nicky just drove past him. So that'll be a great relief for Nicky. And now he's got to set off after the Piquet-Alboreto battle. He's about 6 seconds behind that, so he's going to have to go a bit. They've only got some 12 laps to go.
What a quite incredible man this Niki Lauda is. 35 years old. He was out of Grand Prix racing for 2 years when he decided he was bored with it. He'd had enough. In 1980 and 1981, having stepped out of the Brabham he was driving then in Canada, at the end of practice and saying, I'm not even going to take part in the race. I'm driving round and round and I don't know why I have done it. He recharged his batteries with a 2-year sabbatical running his airline, Lauda Air, in Austria. Then came back in 1982, and this phenomenal man now in his 156th Grand Prix with 24 wins behind him, has now come up from 15th place, a pretty disastrous 15th place. This is Prost, the leader we're looking at. But Lauda, from 15th on the grid, is now up into 4th place, and he's not all that far. He's some 8 seconds behind Alboreto, who is 3rd, who is some 2 seconds behind Piquet, who is 2nd, who is 26 seconds behind the race leader, Alain Prost, and this is the race leader, and we are on lap 57.
And I'm afraid Warwick's in some fairly serious mechanical trouble. He's just gone past us with his engine sounding absolutely horrid. So that was the eventual demise of Derek Warwick. So all that heartache and effort on Nicky's part, he needn't have bothered about. But of course, he's still in the race and chasing, I think, rather vainly, the battle for 2nd place, where Alboreto, on the other hand, is challenging strongly.
Warwick seemingly out to join his teammate Tambay. Another 2-car failure, I'm sorry to say, for Renault as Prost completes another lap. Alio's out, as is his teammate Palmer. Lafitte is out, Rosberg out, so both the Williams are out. Both the JPS Lotuses are out of Elio De Angelis and Nigel Mansell, who we saw parked by the side of the circuit with his car doing its best to catch fire, but Nigel and the Mansell and the Marshals just preventing it. And there is the other Brabham, that of Theo Fabi, which is in 10th place, 2 laps adrift behind this, the leader, Alain Prost. Is it going to be 6 for the Frenchman? It certainly looks like it. There's Lauda ahead of Derek Warwick, and Lauda now on 3 points for 4th position. Prost on 9 points. So Prost has reduced the gap, or would have, by 6 points, leaving him 4.5 or 3.5 behind Lauda if they finish where they are now when the Estoril Grand Prix starts in Portugal on October the 21st. The gap between Lauda and Alboreto, who is in 3rd position, as you see, 12.4 seconds to the nearest 10th. And Lauda, who has consistently been the fastest man on the circuit until Michele Alboreto really started charging in the Ferrari, which is much quicker and much more reliable than it has been in the last few Grand Prix, that is, but not quick enough to challenge the all-conquering McLarens and the Brabham. And there is Alboreto, and you saw just in front of him Nelson Piquet. There's Piquet up behind Gartner, and Alboreto has passed the Alfa Romeo of the 7th place man, Riccardo Patrese. This is the Italian in his first year for Ferrari. Number 27, carrying the late, great Gilles Villeneuve's race number. And it's Piquet, then Gartner, here in 3rd position, Michele Alboreto. So it's McLaren leading, Brabham 2nd, In third position, a Ferrari, that of Alboreto. There was the fourth place McLaren of Niki Lauda. So once again, the McLarens look as though they're going to finish, both of them, in the top 6, really driving home the constructors' superiority that they have had all season, having already won the championship, and they now have 115.5 points compared with the second place Ferrari team's 45.5 points. I can't remember ever any team in Grand Prix racing having the dominance that the John Barnard designed McLarens of Niki Lauda here and Alain Prost have had this year. We're on lap 60. The European Grand Prix, the first World Championship Grand Prix to be held on the new 2.8-mile Nürburgring. Hasn't got the charisma and the charm of the old one, but a lot of attractions nevertheless.
Well, there's a battle royal going on for second place, and well, I say a struggle, I should say, not a real battle yet, because Alboreto just can't quite get onto Piquet's tail. Piquet's just managing to keep a little bit of air between them. They've dealt with some back markers, and Alboreto hasn't been able to use that. But both these drivers battling for second place are absolutely on the limit. It's a real sprint finish going on there. Lauda, in the meantime, I think has really settled for his fourth place. He's slowed right down, he's conserving fuel, he's decided not to take up the cudgels and chase, and I think that's probably a very good decision in the circumstances.
Both the McLarens in the top 6, both the Ferraris in the top 6, one Brabham there and one Renault, and the order on lap 60 remains. Prost leading now by 22 seconds. Piquet is closing, but I'm utterly confident that it is because Alain Prost, seeing victory in his grasp for the 6th time this year, there he is, knowing that if he finishes in first position, he's keeping his World Championship hopes to be the first Frenchman ever to gain that signal honour alive, is taking a steady race and letting Piquet close up on him. And meantime, Nelson Piquet's got problems of his own. He's not only going as hard as he possibly can, and I suspect actually that the BMW engine may have been tuned here in Germany to be marginally on the side of reliability rather than on the side of speed, because it's obviously very important in their home country that BMW should do well and not blow up. There is Piquet second, behind him Alboreto third. Lauda is 16 seconds in fourth place behind Alboreto. Derek Warwick is trailing now. He's 9 seconds in fifth place behind Lauda. Sixth is Arnoux, and Arnoux has got next behind him Alain Prost. So Prost has lapped everybody up to the 6th place man. But for the record, as we look at Alboreto trying to catch Piquet, in 7th position is Patrese. 8th is De Cesaris, then lapped twice in 9th position Boutsen, 10th Fabi, 11th Baldi, 12th is Eno, and then really those are the only 12 runners effectively still in the race, with only 1.7 seconds between Piquet and Alboreto. And Alboreto gaining, it's less than 1.7 seconds now. This is the battle for second. Into turn 1.
Yes, we had a really terrific response there from Piquet, because Alboreto got past Warwick and started to fly, put up the fastest lap of the race by something over half a second. And Piquet has managed to find something extra and respond, because they've been stuck like that for some laps now, about that distance apart, or maybe a little bit further, but Alboreto got up to about that distance and then really was unable to make any further impression. So whether he used everything he'd got or whether Piquet responded, probably a bit of both.
We're on lap 62 now in this 67-lap race. That's Lauda. I don't think, short of Piquet or Alboreto, or of course Prost, having problems, Niki Lauda's going to do any better than 3 points. 3 points for Lauda, 9 points to Prost, 6 points difference. Take that away from 10.5. 4.5 points for Lauda into Estoril, or conceivably 3.5 if the points position is changed at next week's plenary session of FISA, the governing body of motorsport. Alain Prost. Certainly worthy of being the first ever world champion. As for that matter, Niki Lauda is worthy of being world champion for the third time in his long career, because the man you're looking at, Alain Prost, won in Brazil and San Marino, and in that appalling wet race which was shortened in Monaco, at Hockenheim in Germany, and at Assen in Holland. Now, is it going to be for the second time here in Germany a victory for Alain Prost, who's coming up to the Ligier in front of him on his 63rd lap now? Piquet and Alboreto still maintaining station now. Alain Prost got plenty of time to get past the Ligier. It's De Cesaris, and De Cesaris is certainly giving nothing to Alain Prost. As usual, the Italian is not making it at all easy for anybody to pass him, even though he has already been lapped by Alain Prost and must know who it is by looking in his mirrors. And this time he hugs the curb. Alain Prost moves over, gives it lots of welly on the approach to the right-hander at turn 1. And it's Piquet now, who, as James says, has found extra adrenaline and speed, and Derek Warwick is now definitely out of the European Grand Prix because he has stopped.
Yeah, and it looks as if Piquet is going to be able to hold on to that second place. They've really holding stations. They're both driving absolutely flat out. Piquet found that little bit extra, and Alboreto, although he caught up to about a second away from him, just can't get any closer than that. So that looks pretty much settled, although, of course, it is the last few laps where possibilities of fuel problems take place. Niki Lauda has turned his right down, is going nice and slowly now. He has no immediate threat from behind. René Arnoux is still a long way behind him, and Niki will now be keeping everything crossed that maybe either Piquet or Alboreto, I doubt Prost, but either of them might possibly have overcooked their fuel consumption. It'll be an interesting test. However, both Brabham and Ferrari are pretty responsible teams, and they are most likely to set their cars up with a bit to spare.
As on lap 64, out of 67, Prost goes through to complete the lap. I would now like to finish a thought I started earlier on, when it was rudely interrupted by Niki Lauda spinning before our very eyes, and pay tribute not only to the McLaren team, Prost through, here are Piquet and Alboreto second and third, but also to the Porsche concern, and that is De Angelis, who's obviously spun off. I see, no, it's Hainaut, it's Francois Hainaut. To the Porsche concern, who, for Ron Dennis and his sponsors, designed the TAG engine, which has been so superior this year and looks like winning its 11th Grand Prix out of 15 here in Germany today. Because Porsche, who had not been in Grand Prix racing for a long, long time, since the Dan Gurney days, had won all before them in sports car racing, but now are doing exactly the same thing in Grand Prix racing in their first full season. Now, Piquet and Alboreto on lap 65. We might just see a change for second position. I wouldn't think so, because Nelson Piquet is more than aware of the situation. Alain Prost is now only 16 seconds ahead of Piquet, but I say again, I am convinced that it is because Prost is going slower rather than because Piquet, with the challenge of Alboreto behind him, is going faster. Here is the second place man, Piquet, out of the Roma curve. There is Prost, the leader. You saw how close Alboreto in third place was to Piquet. And let's take the gap as soon as I can on the stopwatch, because Alain Prost now is on his penultimate lap. He's on lap 66 out of 67. He's only got this and the next one to go to make it his 6th win out of 14 races, with his teammate Niki Lauda having won 5 as well. And if Alain Prost finishes this lap and the next one where he is, having led from the first corner of the first lap in a car which is not the same as the one which he drove in the half-hour warm-up session, because it has a different engine and a different rear suspension. He's overcome that problem. He's overcome the psychological problem of having crashed in that warm-up, and it looks as though he's got 9 points in the bag. Here he is, through the chicane to start the last lap. Alain Prost on his way to his 6th Grand Prix victory of 1984 starts the last lap, which could and almost certainly will give him 9 World Championship points. In 4th position behind him is teammate Niki Lauda, leading the World Championship by 10.5 points, will get 3 points. So that means to say that the differential will have been closed by 6 points, and there will only be a 4.5 point lead for Niki Lauda as they go into the last Grand Prix of the year in Portugal at Estoril on October the 21st. But now back to the present, and Alain Prost in the Marlboro McLaren with its V6 Porsche-designed TAG engine, which has literally swept all before it in 1984, is up to turn 7, the left-hander, and on his last lap.
Well, the McLarens have dominated the season to such an extent it's been a little bit one-sided, but at least they're going to give us a real grandstand finish in the World Championship. So Alain Prost comes up to complete, collect his 9 points, and then we go in to Estoril for the last round of the championship with battle absolutely joined, and a perfect finish to a very good season for McLarens.
Prost exits the Roma curve, crosses the line. He has won the European Grand Prix, the first ever to be held at the new shortened Nürburgring, and gives a victory salute, and I am sure a smile of exultation inside that helmet of his, because he's still there. He's still in with a chance, and Alboreto is finishing second as they come out of the last corner. Alboreto is across the line in second place, and he's running out of fuel, and so is Nelson Piquet. What a fantastic finish. Both second and third place men, with the positions reversed from the previous lap, run out of fuel and coast in at the end of the last lap.
What an amazing finish, a perfect result. You saw as they came out of the last corner, both cars were weaving all over the road. That's to try and slosh the last few drops of petrol out of the tanks and into the collector. And that was really dramatic. They had raced and raced and raced throughout the race, and those two super responsible teams, look at them, what a wonderful shot. Both of them, after all that hard racing, and it was who had a tiny drop more petrol than the other, and it turned out to be Alboreto. So Niki Lauda takes 4th place, collects 3 points, which means that he's at least 3.5, possibly 4.5 ahead of Prost, which could be a very significant factor when they go to Estoril, and one that Niki will feel quite happy about.
A hugely delighted Michele on the Alboreto on the right, having finished second for the 2nd Grand Prix in succession, because that's where he was in Italy, congratulates Nelson Piquet on just getting across the line, and Nelson does the same to him. So Alain Prost wins what turned out to be a very exciting and dramatic European Grand Prix on the last lap from Michele Alboreto, with Nelson Piquet third in that vital 4th position, as a result of which he's still leading the World Championship, albeit by a diminished margin of, if my mental arithmetic is correct, 4.5 points, Niki Lauda. 5th, and the last man not to be lapped, the 2nd Ferrari of René Arnoux, and in 6th position, Riccardo Patrese, 1 lap behind in the Alfa Romeo. So probably the fact that he was lapped in a car that consistently runs out of fuel on the last lap just got that 1 point for Riccardo Patrese. There is De Cesaris, who has run out of fuel, but nevertheless finished 2 laps down in 7th position, ahead of Mauro Baldi. A fine finish in the Spirit Heart, a much-needed encouragement for the gallant British team in 8th position. Thierry Boutsen in the Arrows 9th. Francois Hainaut well out of the running in 10th position, and they were the only runners effectively at the end of the European Grand Prix. And there you see the standings in the World Championship. Niki Lauda leading now by those 4.5 points from Alain Prost. Elio De Angelis in third position, Nelson Piquet fourth, and he could finish third in the end. Michele Alboreto fifth, and René Arnoux in sixth position. Well, McLaren have done it again. McLaren have underlined their superiority. Prost has won his sixth. Now, will Lauda win his sixth in Estoril and the championship with it? Join us there and see for yourselves.
Dreizähler macht 66 Punkte, Alain Prost gewinnt 9 dazu zu 52,5, also 61,5 Punkte. 4,5 Punkte, Sie sehen es auf unserer Grafik, Abstand zwischen Lauda und Prost vor dem Rennen. Der Österreicher hat noch einen Vorsprung, zehrt davon vielleicht noch im letzten Rennen, aber es ist spannend geblieben. Die Formel 1 Weltmeisterschaft 1984 wird erst im letzten Rennen dieser Saison entschieden werden, in 14 Tagen in Estoril in Portugal. Die weitere Rangfolge können Sie selber ablesen, die Konkurrenz weit abgeschlagen hinter den beiden McLaren-Piloten aus Österreich und aus Frankreich.
Des neuen Rundenrekords mit der Zeit von 1 Minute 23,146 Sekunden.
Insgesamt 21 Fahrer in dieser Saison mit Punkten in der Formel 1 Fahrer-Weltmeisterschaft. Strahlende, wenngleich jetzt schon etwas schräg drehende Sonne in der Eifel. Die Kritiker, die Skeptiker sind jedenfalls vom Veranstalter und vor allem von Petrus widerlegt worden, die da sagten, es gäbe im Oktober schon Schnee in der Eifel. Strahlende Sonne hatten wir und einen wunderschönen, einen interessanten Grand Prix, wenngleich wir doch wieder sehr viele Ausfälle zu verzeichnen hatten. Die altehrwürdige Nürburg hat also nach 36 Grand Prix auf der alten Nordschleife den ersten auf dem neuen Kurs gesehen. Hier sehen wir meinen Kollegen Helmut G. Müller, wie er gerade versucht, sich an Alain Prost und an Niki Lauda heranzutasten, in der Hoffnung, dass wir sofort ein kleines Interview machen können. Ich schalte um.
Niki, es war eigentlich ein großartiges Rennen, leider hat es aber nicht gereicht. Ne?
Ich war nicht zufrieden mit gedreht, weil wir waren unten vom Baldi und habe meine Tires flat spotted, das heißt, die haben alle einen abgefahrenen Teil drauf und dann vibriert das Auto so, dass man nicht mehr richtig fahren kann.
Aber Sie schmunzeln, ich glaube, Sie sind ganz zufrieden mit dem Rennen. Sind Sie eigentlich überholt worden? Sie haben nur überholt, sind nur nach vorne gefahren.
So zufrieden bin ich mit dem Rennen nicht, aber so geht es halt manchmal.
Nun, die Entscheidung in Estoril ist Ihnen sicher nicht recht. Kennen Sie den Kurs? Keiner kennt ihn, glaube ich.
Ja, keiner kennt ihn, aber mal schauen, wie es geht.
Zuversichtlich.
Ein bisschen kurz angebunden war ja fraglos der Niki Lauda, aber das muss man natürlich verstehen, wenn man doch mit der heimlichen Hoffnung ins Rennen geht, vielleicht hier und heute schon Weltmeister werden zu können. Und wenn dann doch die Entscheidung vertagt wird, dennoch Respekt vor dem Österreicher für sein hervorragendes Aufholrennen aus der Startposition 15 bis vor zum 4. Platz. Kompliment aber auch an Alain Prost, der ein souveränes Rennen zum Sieg beim großen Preis von Europa auf dem Nürburgring gefahren ist. Hier sahen wir eben noch den Renault mit der Nummer 16, das ist der von Derek Warwick, ausgeschieden auch nach Patrick Tambay. Da sehen wir noch einmal Niki Lauda, der natürlich zu gerne heute schon Weltmeister geworden wäre, zum 3. Male nach 1975 und 1977. Es hat nicht sollen sein. Es wurde nicht sein 25. Grand Prix-Sieg, sondern es wurde hier auf dem Nürburgring der 15. für Alain Prost. Hier sehen wir das Siegerfahrzeug, den McLaren des Franzosen. Wunderschöne, stimmungsvolle Bilder zum Abschluss dieses schönen Grand Prix auf dem Nürburgring. Man darf eigentlich hoffen, meine Damen und Herren, dass zu den 60.000, die heute da waren, in Zukunft der ein oder andere von Ihnen, die Sie vielleicht zu Hause das Rennen verfolgt haben, wieder hinzukommt, sich wieder anlocken lässt von der Atmosphäre auch des neuen Nürburgring, von dem ja nur eins geblieben ist vom alten, nämlich die alte Tribüne. schnelle, spontane Interviews. Jetzt natürlich
Darf Ihnen
nach
vielleicht
dem
noch
Rennen.
sagen, dass der
Das war Mauro Baldi,
den Ehrenpreis
der Italiener,
ARAG erhält, wird
der da,
überreicht von Dr.
wenn ich so sagen darf, ohne ihm eine Schuld zuschieben zu wollen, verantwortlich dafür zeichnete, dass Niki Lauda den einen Dreher hatte, der ihn sicherlich 10, 12, vielleicht auch 15 Sekunden bei der Aufholjagd kostete.
Schönbeck, der Präsident, hat diesen Preis gestiftet, wird ihn vielleicht auch selbst
Es
überreichen.
sind, ich möchte das ganz persönlich anmerken, für mich ehrlich gesagt immer wieder erfreuliche, schöne Bilder, wenn man nach diesem harten Rennen mit den 700 PS Boliden um jeden Zentimeter, um jede Zehntelsekunde sieht, dass sie spätestens nach dem Rennen doch wieder miteinander sprechen, denn fraglos sind alle Formel-1-Piloten Individualisten. Sie kommen oftmals nur bei der Fahrerbesprechung zusammen, aber nach dem Rennen gehen sie dann wie Konfetti auseinander. Jeder fliegt woanders hin. Das Fahnenmeer hier bei Start und Ziel. Die Formel 1 ja eine internationale Angelegenheit. Das Interesse riesig groß. Heute waren unserer Übertragung 18 ausländische Stationen angeschlossen im Fernsehen und 12 Rundfunkstationen waren ebenfalls live auf dem Nürburgring dabei. Das Siegerauto, der McLaren von Alain Prost.
Nelson Piquet ankommen zu Fuß. Nelson, congratulations, without gasoline.
Es ist sicherlich der Platz, um hier noch einmal ein ganz großes Kompliment loszuwerden, insbesondere an McLaren Porsche, an Ron Dennis und sein Team, denn hier hat man es verstanden, auch in Verbindung mit Ingenieur Metzger, ein ganz hervorragendes Auto zu präparieren. Ein Fahrzeug, das alle Rekorde schlug in dieser Saison, was die Beständigkeit anlangt. 6 Siege jetzt für Alain Prost, 5 für Niki Lauda, 11 damit in 15 Rennen für einen Rennstall. Das hat es in der Formel 1 in der Geschichte bisher noch nicht gegeben. Die Turbolader, insgesamt ja noch recht anfällig. Wir haben es an der Ausfallquote auch heute wieder erfahren müssen. Aber die Formel 1 spätestens natürlich, als man die Wings und die Skirts, also die Untergrundprofile und die Schürzen verbot, wieder sicherer geworden. Niki Lauda sagt sogar, so sicher wie nie. Noch verzögert sich ein wenig das Siegerzeremoniell, aber ich glaube, es gehört einfach dazu, nachdem man einem Formel-1-Rennen, so wie wir jetzt, 1,75 Stunden lang beigewohnt hat, es mit Spannung verfolgt hat, dass man dann auch noch dabei ist, wenn der Sieger gekürt wird und wenn für ihn die Hymne erklingt. Die ONS-Sicherheitsstaffel kehrt zufrieden zurück zu Start und Ziel. In diesem Fall im Schlepptau Fabi, der ausgeschiedene Brabham-Pilot, zufrieden vor allem deshalb, weil es hier zwar einige Ausritte ins Grüne gegeben hat, aber eben keine schweren Unfälle. Mit der 19, das ist Ayrton Senna, der Brasilianer mit dem Toleman, ein Mann, von dem man in der Zukunft noch einiges erwartet. In der Zukunft, die ihn ja wegführt von diesem Team, Ayrton Senna im nächsten Jahr bei Lotus. Dafür geht Nigel Mansell zu Williams. Und da ist der Sieger des heutigen Grand Prix, des großen Preises von Europa, der Präsident des Automobilclubs von Deutschland, Fürst Metternich, überreicht Alain Prost den Siegerkranz für seinen 15. Formel-1-Sieg. Auf den Plätzen links Alain Piquet, der sympathische Brasilianer, und auf Rang 3 Michele Alboreto, der Ferrari-Pilot aus Italien.
Alain Prost siegte in der Fahrzeit von 1 Stunde 35 Minuten 13,28 Sekunden. Der Alain Prost erhielt den Goldenen Kranz und die AVD Fürst Metternich-Trophäe, den Ehrenpreis des Ministerpräsidenten von Rheinland-Pfalz, überreicht von unserem Schirmherrn Dr. Vogel. Der Zweitplatzierte im Ziel mit der Startnummer 27, Michele Alboreto von Ferrari Italien gemeldet, erhält den Ehrenpreis der ARAG, überreicht von Dr. Ludwig Fassbender, Vorstandsmitglied der ARAG. Und nun zum dritten, mit der Startnummer 1 ins Rennen gegangen, Nelson Piquet, Brasilien, vom Parmalat Brabham, England gemeldet. Ehrenpreis des VDA-Präsidenten